Good morning and good afternoon and good evening to all of you. I'm wishing you a happy Earth Day Eve. On behalf of the GIF International Waters Learn project, funded by the GF, implemented jointly by the United Nations Development Program and the UN Environment Program, and executed by the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of UNESCO, and jointly together with the Scientific Committee on the Problems of the Environment and the University of Rhode Island's Coastal Resource Center, I'm welcoming you to this online event today in support of the launch of the LME Definitive Volume and Portfolio. Just some quick housekeeping. Please do use the chat window to share information or notify us of any technical problems. We will use the chat to share important links with you. We have two opportunities during our event for your questions, and please do utilize the Q&A function on the Zoom chat to ask your questions, and we'll consolidate them for our speakers to address during the Q&A segments. And to inform all participants, this event is being recorded for later distribution. Let's begin. Large marine ecosystems are located along the margins of the continents. They produce 80% of the world's annual marine fisheries catch, and their spatial domains contribute an estimated $27.2 trillion in ecosystem services annually to the global economy. Already at the forefront of supporting a science-based assessment of the oceans, as well as their regional governance, is the large marine ecosystem approach, which brings together multiple countries at the ministerial level to support ecosystem-based ocean governance and assessment. IW Learn, together with its sister project LME Learn, hosted by IOC, have been providing technical support, coordination, information, and knowledge management services to the many GEF-funded marine and coastal projects since the year 2000. And our support to this event and to the publications we are launching today are part of those services. So today, to support the mitigating of stressors on LMEs, the Scientific Committee on Problems of the Environment, and together with our support, launched the 649-page definitive volume, also known as the eBook and portfolio, of scientific applications for the sustainable development of the world's LMEs. The aim of today's event is to raise awareness and disseminate information on the definitive volume and the 54 peer-reviewed articles it contains. The portfolio brings together examples of best natural science and social science practices for assessing and managing the world's LMEs, and both will help countries and partners to implement SDG 14 targets and contribute to the UN Decade for Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, led by the IOC. By now, you should have received instructions to access the ebook and the portfolio in the chat box. Now, to set the context and go into more detail on both the ebook and the portfolio, we've assembled a wonderful mix of speakers today from different perspectives of science and management when it comes to LMEs and the various partnerships that have been configured to lead the projects to support ecosystem-based management of LMEs. In our first session, we will have a panel that will introduce the LME portfolio in the context of SDG 14 and other associated SDGs, and highlight the proven approaches that have succeeded in reversing the various stressors on LMEs. The panelists will explain the science of LMEs and the resulting applications of science that can contribute to member states' work. This introductory session truly celebrates the 37 years of science developed by LME projects and stakeholders. And I now have the great pleasure to introduce our first speaker, the Honorable Dr. Vladimir Ryabinin, who will speak about how the UN Ocean Decade will advance ecosystem-based science and management. Dr. Ryabinin is the Executive Secretary of the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of UNESCO, as well as an Assistant Director General. Dr. Ryabinin is an oceanographer, marine engineer, climatologist, and emeritus meteorologist of Russia. His research has led to a number of achievements in the numerical weather prediction on a weekly timescale, in marine meteorological services, offshore engineering, and ocean and climate science. He's been the author of hundreds of scientific publications and originator of several mathematical models and studies for the ocean, atmosphere, and wind waves. And Dr. Ryabinin, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hamid. I cannot only agree with that I'm honorable doctor. I think we all have our sleeves rolled up, and we really, really work, and this is our life. But anyway, thank you for this wonderful introduction. I would like to say the following. That IOC is very much committed to supporting LMEs because you're central for us. IOC has been in this business almost since inception, You know, of course, Ken Sherman started this work a long time ago, but already in 90s, IUC joined this work, helped to develop the concept and engagement of member states. So then since 1995, we have been already working, providing convening platform for this. And of course, IUC was very happy to host a very talented group of people working, led by actually Mitch Hamid and Natalie Deger, who are organizing this meeting towards contributing of the GEF, UNDP, IW Learn. And so we are with you all the time. So, you know, what we all feel that, of course, we know that we need to fulfill this obligation of governments, you know, Sustainable Development Goal 14, but basically we are now trying to instigate a new paradigm in managing the ocean. And this is very close to what Ken Sherman started in the 80s by thinking what is the manageable object that you can address with full strength of science. We realize that the strength of science is not sufficient now, because new issues emerge all the time, and also science keeps being divided. And so this is exactly the beauty and efficiency of that approach, that of LME approach, that you can start working together, and this is absolutely necessary. So you know, the decade will hopefully, and I think it's starting well now, move towards from science that is based on curiosity and is driven by the sense of wonderful sense, of course, of discovery, to the science that we all now need to survive, to the science of practical solutions. So in principle, we also recognize that despite, and this is what also Mitch Hamid said at the beginning, that the wealth that is generated by ecosystems is of the order of $2 trillion US. The investments into science are also coming from mostly coming from the science funding sense, and they are not of the same scale. So this is, science is considered as a burden, but not an investment, while it is an investment. So the decade of ocean science is designed to turn that to change that paradigm and to start co-design science, focusing on the solutions. And this requires basically creating an end-to-end system, from observations to data management, then to modeling and prediction and assessment, work with policies. And I would like to say that apparently this is starting to work. You know, we believe that by the end of 2030, many more countries than the 14 heads of state of government of countries that belong to the high-level panel for sustainable ocean economy will start managing their exclusive economic zones, and we hopefully will have also approaches to manage open ocean. But anyway, so I think now, since last year, we already have fantastic development. If 40 states manage 100% of their exclusive economic zones based on science, based on good plans, then the paradigm is really changing, and we will be able to address multiple stresses. So in principle, of course, we understand that there are such big areas of development and also political debate as climate science, as biodiversity, as ocean economy. So I think ocean may provide a manageable space for engaging the science, developing its capacity, and creating a space for solutions. So LME approach is very important in that sense. And I welcome very much the definite volume, because I think this is basically providing for us a summary of where we are. So we had of the IPCC special report on ocean in the cryosphere and the changing climate. From IPBES, we had an assessment of biodiversity, both in 2019. Now we have the World Ocean Assessment 2 coming out in 2021. We have this definite volume of LMEs. We also have the state global ocean science report. We know the capacity of ocean science, and I think this gives us a totally new possibility to leverage from this knowledge and to move forward. So IOC is committed to keep working with you in very effective manner. And I think we need to focus on regional capacity development, because I think this is also one of the challenges of the decade, not leaving anyone behind. So we can, I think, engage your community in discussing with communities of climate and many other communities that are in decision-making positions. So I would say learning is very important. Training will be important. And I think we also need to integrate coastal zone management, maritime special planning, and also LME and approaches together. I think we have manageable approaches, and this is very, very promising. And I think with that, we have the science, we are going to have the plans, we have the, and we have, I think, fantastic future ahead of us. And, you know, successes of communities, scientists, sometimes are measured in terms of scientific papers, in terms of their recognition. But ladies and gentlemen, with the approach that Ken Sherman started in 1980s, that we are developing, ladies and gentlemen, we can save the ocean for the future generations. And this is beyond any recognition. We can save 70% of our planet if we move together based on science and based also on the management approaches. If it's that, I would like to greet you all and wish you a very successful meeting on LME definite volume. Thank you so much for your work and your attention.
Thank you so much, Vladimir, Dr. Rivinen, for your inspirational words and letting us know how the Ocean Decade will change that paradigm. And thank you for the commitment of IOC to making this happen. Our next speaker, John Samseth, will convey the SCOPE perspective on the LME approach. John is the president of SCOPE, the Scientific Committee on the Environment. He is a professor of physics at the Oslo Metropolitan University in Norway, and currently he is managing one of the large wind energy research projects in Europe and is an elected member of the Norwegian Academy of Technological Sciences. John, the floor is yours.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be able to address you, and SCOPE is very proud to be able to bring this volume to the market. Now, SCOPE is the Scientific Committee of Problems of the Environment. It was formed some 50 years ago and is currently the affiliated member of the International Science Council. So we have more than 50 years of experience putting out synthesis and assessments, and we have been even including some Nobel Prize winners. So putting out this volume of the LME is kind of in the very core of the SCOPE activities. The SCOPE then has some workshops, international seminars. You do rapid assessment projects, and the major part of SCOPE is then publications. And over the years, we have been touching almost any issue that relates to environment. And of course, you know, with this volume 73, that means there are 72 volumes before, and several of them has had to do something with oceans. If we go 20 years back, we had Oceans 2020, which was then a volume that came out in collaboration with IOC and SCORE. And it has been a landmark, but now we need a new landmark, which will then be the SCOPE volume 73. Now, this year, I would say that this event is, or the publication of this volume is one of the SCOPE landmarks. But in addition, we have some other landmarks. We are establishing an office in Mysore in India. We're launching a new commission in Nanjing. And we are also introducing Habitable Planet program into India, which is then engaging undergraduate students with into the environmental programs. So then when it comes to large marine ecosystems, I would say they are highly relevant and important mechanism for the assessment of the management of the coastal systems. And what we in SCOPE like is that the 5-module approach: productivity, fisheries, pollution, ecosystem health, socioeconomics, governance, because all these things together, that's a truly cross-disciplinary approach, and that is what scope is all about. One important feature in helping bring this out has been the scope journal, Environmental Development, and several of the key papers has over the years appeared in that journal. And Elsevier is one of our close collaborators. The basis here, the conceptual basis of the LME is the brainchild of Ken Sherman, who has kind of dedicated his lifetime to bringing this topic into the science and bringing out the whole concept. But along with him, there has been several hundreds and maybe thousands of other scientists in other disciplines that has also helped to bring this approach along. But there's one person that really has been important in the last few years, and that's Betsy Peterson. And she is also then, of course, the editor of this volume together with Ken. So there has been a lot of people involved in bringing all these manuscripts together, and Scope is then proud to be kind of the producer of this volume, and that's also why we have. It's so important for Scope that these things are freely available and not tied to any kind of publisher. So that is why you can now download or ask for a request for a download of this volume for free. The LMEs, are complex and they are dynamic systems, but the approach that Ken Sherman has come up with has provided the framework so that you can assess and manage these systems, which otherwise would have been impossible. So before I end, I'd like to acknowledge the key persons here is Ken, of course, that has been the driving force. Betsy, who's been the organizer and the helper that really made this thing come true for all the practical reasons. She's been, we can call her the scientific organizers. The Scope team with Sarah Gaines and Neville Swage, and Neville has certainly been the driver on the Scope side. The publishing company in South Africa, Kashan, has also had a vital role in kind of developing the volume itself. Now also the Coastal Resources Center at the University of Rhode Island has been instrumental in hosting some of the workshop that has been that must have been for this for bringing out the knowledge into this volume. And then lastly, the Jeff and the IW Learn has been instrumental in kind of bringing the financial resources and organizing not only this event but also the volume. So we would like to congratulate and thank everybody involved, and this Scope volume certainly will be a milestone and monument for the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John, and thank you for a great partnership on bringing all this science. The work of Scope, as you've described, is so crucial to bring out that science, and we look forward to, at least from our side, for many more years of continued partnership on this effort. And now I would like to ask Dr. Ken Sherman to speak about the Large Marine Ecosystem Global Assessment and Management Movement. Dr. Sherman doesn't really need a special introduction. It's enough to say that in front of us we have a maverick figure who has devoted most of his life to developing and promoting the LME approach. His research has been focused on the assessment and management of the goods and services of the world's LMEs, and it's his lifetime work and legacy. Dr. Sherman is now based at the Coastal Resource Center, but served for many years as NOAA's director of the LME program. So, Dr. Sherman, the floor is yours.
Yes, well, thank you very much, Mitch, for those kind words. And I simply would like to highlight very few aspects of the LME approach that I believe are important and particularly relative to present conditions and the interest expressed by the United Nations in a sustainable development goal for the oceans, and in the proclamation of the years 2021 to 2030 as a decade of ocean science in support of sustainable development. With regard to the actual locations of these world's 66 LMEs, you see them projected here in figure 1. They are determined in terms of their spatial dimension on a basis of 4 ecological criteria: bathymetry, hydrography, productivity, and trophic linkages. The LME assessment and management approach is based on the application of 5 modules, as mentioned earlier. And these modules consist of a number of indicator suites. And those indicator suites are focused on very important components of large marine ecosystems, namely the productivity, the fish and fisheries, the pollution and ecosystem health. And these are natural science contributions, and they are linked to social science contributions in relationship to supporting actions for improving socioeconomic conditions and supporting a mechanism for governance or management of the large marine ecosystems. And taken together, it's proven to be a rather pragmatic approach that has achieved some success over the years since its introduction back in 1984 at the annual meeting of the American Society for the Advancement of Science. The scientific foundations of the LME approach following that seminal symposium has been strengthened by the studies and results of over 450 marine scientists and resource specialists appearing in 18 LME volumes published by the American Association for the Advancement of Science, Westview Press, Blackwell Science, Elsevier Science, IUCN, UNDP, GEF, and approximately 400 journal articles. Now, we've prepared an annotated bibliography of LME literature, and it's been published by NOAA, and it is available on the NOAA website. With regard to NOAA, the LME approach to the assessment and management of coastal oceans and services was recognized by NOAA as one of the 10 most noteworthy and transforming breakthroughs during its 200-year anniversary in 2008, as described again on the NOAA website. The pragmatic adaptation of the LME approach to ecosystem-based management and the sustainable development of the oceans is presently underway in LME projects in over 100 economically developing nations active in 22 LMEs off the coast of Africa, Asia, Latin America, and Eastern Europe, is depicted in Figure 3. And these LME projects are supported with $6.01 billion in catalytic financial assistance from the Global Environment Facility. The GEF is a financial institution established in the early 1990s to support economically developing countries to mitigate environmental stressors on sustainable developing activities, including their emerging marine economies, encompassing fisheries, energy, transportation, tourism, and mining. In 1995, the GEF included the LME approach in their operating guidelines. In the intervening 26 years, a global movement towards sustainable development of LME goods and services has been provided with scientific and technical support from 5 United Nations organizations, 2 NGOs, 2 international financial organizations, and several national ocean research and assessment institutions in the United States, Germany, Norway, and Sweden. In 2015, the UN included the specific goal and targets for sustainable development of the oceans, and in 2019, issued a proclamation for designating 2021 to 2030 as the decade of ocean science for sustainable development. So in support of meeting the objectives of UN SDG 14 and the Ocean Decade, the Scientific Committee on Problems of the Environment, SCOPE, as you have just learned from John Sampseth, its president, is today releasing a 694-page book of 50 chapters of selected published best science practices in support of LME sustainable development, titled Ocean Sustainability, Assessing and Managing the World's Large Marine Ecosystems. The selected papers from the published LME literature are examples of best practices for supporting an ecosystem-based approach to LME assessment and management based on the results of studies of, as we mentioned earlier, LME productivity, fish and fisheries, pollution and ecosystem health, socioeconomics, and governance. A companion LME informational and educational document is also being released simultaneously by IW Learn, and covers of both of these documents are shown in Figure 4. And that concludes my more or less formal presentation. I look forward to our further discussions with the panel and the general audience. Thank you for your attention.
Sorry, thank you again very much, Dr. Sherman, and for your lifetime of work to this approach. And I will now turn, this session would not be completed without hearing from an organization which has implemented a multitude of these LME programs. So I also have the pleasure to introduce Dr. Andy Hudson to speak about the United Nations Development Program and its LME approach. Dr. Hudson is the UNDP is the head of the UNDP Water and Ocean Governance Program in the Nature, Climate, and Energy team of UNDP's Bureau for Policy and Program Support. He oversees and provides strategic policy and technical guidance on all aspects of the development, implementation, and evaluation of UNDP's work in the water and ocean governance sector, with a currently active portfolio of about $400 million working in over 100 countries. So Andy, Dr. Hudson, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mish, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Many friends, colleagues, and LME fellows around the world. Before I start, I want to really take this moment to congratulate Ken and really every one of the hundreds of authors of all the great papers in this definitive volume. It is a unique collection of robust science that has informed our and other work on LME conservation and management for now almost 40 plus years. So congrats on that. I want to basically highlight some of the success stories and linkages between the UNDP's now 30-year plus application of the LME approach in its oceans programming, and of course to SDG 14, the oceans SDG. And the good news is the linkages are very strong, very profound, and we can already see the many impacts that application of the LME approach has had in different contexts around the world. Next slide. So SDG 14, we all know very well, to conserve and sustainably use the oceans, seas, and marine resources for sustainable development. Next slide. So starting with SDG 14.2, which is in some ways the most obvious and pertinent to the LME approach, it's to sustainably manage and protect marine and coastal ecosystems. And embedded in that SDG, of course, is application of the ecosystem-based approach. So this graphic shows many of the LME programs UNDP has supported with GF financing over the years, from the Caribbean to the Humboldt Current, the Yellow Sea, the Red Sea, the Sulu Celebes Sea LME, and so forth. Next slide. So of course, as prescribed by the GEF back in 1995 in its first operational strategy, when the concept of TDA SAP was first brought forth and adopted, UNDP has been consistently applying that methodology of both assessment and fact-finding combined with strategic planning. And this is the typical graphic describing the general steps in applying the TDA SAP process toward first the identification and prioritization of key water and biodiversity related issues in LMEs, conducting root cause analysis to tease down what are the key usually market and policy failures that are driving degradation in these ecosystems. That becomes the gist of the TDA. And then of course the TDA being the technical basis to inform the more political process of negotiating, a multi-country negotiation of a SAP that determines, for example, long-term ecosystem quality objectives, how you'd go about achieving those objectives, primarily through policy, regulatory, institutional reforms, investments, and so forth. Looks at the real, kind of a feasibility of these kind of alternatives and options, and then finally articulates that whole package in the strategic action program, which is almost always, as Jeff expects, adopted at the highest level, at the ministerial level. Next slide. So in sum, over the years, UNDP has invested in 14 different LMEs, as well as the West and Central Pacific, which is sometimes considered an LME, and that support spans 94 countries that have been supported. In total, because of the fact that some of these programs are covering multi-LMEs, such as the Caribbean and the North Brazil Shelf, we've supported the preparation and ministerial adoption of 12 LME in the West and Central Pacific, TDAs and SAPs adopted, and initial, and in some cases, quite extended support to their implementation. The total GEF, this is just the GEF grant investment today, is about $300 million US. And of course, that has leveraged 4 or 5, even more times that in a wide range of co-financing from partners and others. Next slide. So just to highlight a few, kind of impact examples of how the LME approach has succeeded in our work. If you look at SDG 14.1, of course, marine pollution. We had a long-running, almost 20-year investment in the Black Sea and the Danube River basin, mainly targeting the priority issue there, which was hypoxia and eutrophication in the northwest shelf of the Black Sea. And you can see that over the years, through investments in both policy reform, but also large-scale investments in things like wastewater treatment, industrial pollution treatment, and so forth, that the oxygen levels in the Black Sea returned to sort of pre-anthropogenic levels, and more importantly, the hypoxic zone of the Black Sea was largely eliminated, and we saw the ecosystem recover with various taxa returning that were locally extinct for periods, and so forth. So this is a great success story of a application of TDA SAP to an LME, in this case, the Black Sea, leading to large-scale positive impact on the ecosystem. Next slide. Okay, 14.4 SDG is to end illegal, unregulated, and unreported fishing and general overfishing. And our case study here is our long-running, again, about 20 years of support to the 14 Pacific Island countries and through various partners, the Foreign Fisheries Agency, FAO, and others. This Western Central Pacific represents 1/2 of all the world's tuna catch, about 2.5 million tons per year. And one of the first things we did in these programs would help the Pacific Island countries in the negotiation of what became the Western Central Pacific Fisheries Convention to get a fair deal in this convention in terms of access to and utilization and benefiting from this large-scale marine resource. So over the years, this included the introduction of what is now the world's largest and most robust vessel monitoring system and onboard observer system, introduction of market-based mechanisms, in particular the P&A, or the Parties to the Nauru Agreement, which is a vessel day scheme where fishing vessels pay, fishing companies pay for vessel days on the water through an auction system. That has generated over $500 million per year in recent years for the Pacific Island countries. Of course, embedding the ecosystem-based approach. And then the net result, and this was just reported as recently as 2019, all 4 tuna stocks in that region have been moved to 100% sustainability. That's a remarkable achievement. In fact, this is the only major tuna area in the world where all 4 stocks are now fished sustainably. Next slide. 14.7, very important, by 2030 is to increase the economic benefits to SIDS and least developed countries from their marine resources. And actually, I'm using the same example here because this has been also a real flagship story here, that over the years, in part with UNDP and Jeff and other support, technical and financial support, we've seen the share of the catch that has been taken by Pacific Island-owned fleets increase now to over 50% of the catch. We've seen their fee revenue roughly triple from the 2010 level to 2017 level to now over 500 million. The contribution of this fishing to the Pacific Islands GDP has also roughly doubled. Employment of Pacific Islanders in the Pacific Island fleet has doubled to almost 22,000 people employed. And lastly, their export value has roughly doubled from about $500 million to $1 billion over roughly the last 10 years. So this is a remarkable, socio-economic transformation story, as well as, of course, an ecosystem sustainability story. Next slide. 14.A is to increase the scientific knowledge, develop research capacity, transfer technology in ocean science. And in certain cases, Jeff has been willing to invest sizable sums to help fill data and knowledge gaps in these LMEs we're working. And by conducting on-the-ground marine ecosystem assessments, oceanographic assessments, and building national science capacity. And probably our flagship example here is the Jeff investment through UNDP in the Gulis and Somali LME, where a whole series, as shown in the list there, of assessment cruises were carried out over several years. Strong support and involvement from NOAA, deployment of Argo floats, and many other forms of cooperation. And these cruises dramatically increased the data and information base on these 2 LMEs. And of course, that better informed the development of the TDA and the associated SAP. So that was a great investment in the realization of SDG 14.A. Next slide. 14.B is to provide access to small-scale fisheries to marine resources and markets. Several examples there. The Caribbean LME program has supported the spiny lobster fishery, including its small-scale fishery elements in development of management plans, conducting stock assessments, introduction of traceability, and introduction of alternative livelihoods in the closed season. Similar support given to the Caribbean flying fish fishery. And then the shifting to the UNDP Jeff Global Marine Commodities Project, which has mainly been among others, have been focusing on large pelagics in Costa Rica. They have engaged small-scale fisheries in helping create overall a more sustainable value chain for that fishery. And lastly, the Jeff Coastal Fisheries Initiative, UNDP runs the Latin America component in both Peru and Ecuador, has supported small-scale fisheries in terms of the introduction of voluntary guidelines and helping the government to mainstream and integrate its management and oversight of the small-scale fisheries sector. Next slide. And last but not least, 14.C is SDG is to implement international law as reflected in UNCLOS. And so if you look at the Jeff, UNDP and other Jeff LME and fisheries portfolio, clearly we're supporting either directly in many cases or at least indirectly a large number of various both global and regional ocean and related legal agreements. So just to flag a few, the FAO straddling stocks and port state measures agreements, several, as we've heard today, regional fisheries agreements, the associated RFMOs, various UNEP regional seas conventions, Red Sea, Black Sea, Caribbean, etc. The Jeff, of course, was instrumental in both the creation and the operationalization of the Benguela Current LME Convention and its commission, various IMO conventions, maritime conventions, ballast water, MARPOL, etc., have benefited from LME programs over the years. The CBD and IHE targets, the marine-related targets, are of course instrumental. And lastly, the UNCLOS itself as the overarching legal framework for the ocean has very much benefited over these years from the LME investment. So thank you very much, Nish and colleagues, for letting me share a little bit today, and looking forward to the continuation of the great event.
Thank you again, Andy, so much for their presentation and really illustrating how this science is being leveraged, in this case by UNDP, into so much action agreements and policy and governance, and of course, all this excellent illustration of catalyzing ocean finance. So participants and panelists, we have reached the end of the first panel. We're a little bit behind schedule, so I think we will just take 2 or 3 questions and then move on to our next round. And I think there are a few questions on the screen here. You can see in the Q&A section. And the first would be from Mr. Guillaume Drier for Dr. Ken Sherman. Within the LME framework, do you have anything on bioinvasions? Ken, I hope you can unmute yourself.
Yes, I can unmute myself. And I think that the most striking contribution is the activities of IMO in relationship to ballast water and increasing control over the handling of ballast water to reduce non-indigenous species introductions to various parts of the world. And here we have some successes. Andy could speak to it more directly, but the movement has been quite remarkable, and the interest on the part of the transportation industry has been very positive. And this is extremely important because most of the goods that transit from Southeast Asia to Europe are carried in very large ships that have the capacity for moving literally hundreds of tons of water and their resident planktonic organisms in the face of the lack of any evolutionary control. There have been some severe outbreaks of non-indigenous species causing economic problems. And I think that the IMO and the UNDP and the ballast water story is well worth publicizing as a means for dealing with invasion at least with regard to the marine environment.
And Mish, I can touch on that very quickly, following up on Ken. As he mentioned, the Jeff and UNDP, over a 17-year period, invested in two major steps or stages of what became the Globalist program, supporting in the end about 80 countries in the industry and transitioning to more effective and safe ballast water management and control, including, of course, the parallel negotiation and bringing into force of a global convention on ships' ballast water. And the other, the other linkage there is the ballast program worked very closely in many cases at the regional level with and through the LMEs as vehicles for promotion of more effective ballast water management and treatment in the marine waters that the LMEs are responsible for. That was a very important partnership. If you want to get a great exposure to the ballast water story, simply Google Globalist story, and you will go directly to the volume we published about 3 years ago now, summarizing the entire history of that investment.
Thank you both very much, Andy and Ken. We are a little bit quite behind now, but I think we'll do one more question and then we'll move on to the next panel. And this was a question for Vladimir and Michael. I guess we have got your question too, but for this question, the question to Vladimir was, how can the LME community become more involved in the UN Decade of Ocean Science? I thought this was a quite important question. And Dr. Rubinin had to leave for another meeting, but we are pleased to call on Mr. Julien Barbier, who is the head of Marine Policy and Regional Coordination section in IOC. Julien, I believe you might be able to unmute yourself.
Yes, Mish, always happy to help. Good morning, good afternoon, dear colleagues and dear friends. Very happy to see so many of you around here. And indeed, the decade, I think, offers a quite unique opportunity for the LME community to also advance the design and the co-delivery of solutions, of science-based solutions to support ecosystem-based management, to support the goals that have been described as which are really much embedded within the the LME projects. You should really consider in the decade, and now we have an implementation plan which was endorsed by the UN General Assembly at the end of last year. But it is really a high-level framework for designing action, actions that are inclusive, that have co-designed, that are focused on co-delivery of science and solutions to support a number of challenges that have been identified in this implementation plan. And many of those are very much aligned, I think, with the overall LME objectives and outcomes. We identify four levels of actions. We have, of course, large-scale international programs, more focused projects, maybe focusing on one aspect of an ocean basin or a thematic aspect. We have activities, and then we also have contributions. We want to also encourage member states, institutions, donors, philanthropy, also to provide support to the actions of a decade as those become, are being realized. So this is really, I think, the first entry point. We've launched a first call for decade actions last year, and we've received over 250 proposals from from all over the world, from scientists, from private sector, from governments. And those will basically are going through a review process and will eventually be announced as decade programs or actions and will be endorsed as such. And those really try to bring together, the different groups of stakeholders to a table. So this is also one way to engage, and we will have several calls of action in the lifetime of the decade. We have 10 years, but we can also work with the LME community in really identifying where are the certain gaps in knowledge, in science, in data, in specific scientific infrastructures, and really use those call for actions to call for those additional investments. So I would say that this is certainly one direct way to get engaged through the call for actions. Another way is also through the regional and thematic networks that are being established as part of a decade. The decade implementation plan took about 2 or 3 years to build this plan, and this was done through inclusive preparatory process, really working with regional ocean stakeholders. And those platforms are still very much there and still feeding the decade. So I would also invite all of our colleagues to work with the Caribbean platform, the one for the Med, the one for the Indian Ocean, and so on, as a place to really identify joint collaborative activities and also additional investment and support that is required to realize those actions. So I think this is I guess one way to get engaged. I just want finally to announce that on the 1st of June we will have an international launching event for the decade, and this will be followed by a series of decade laboratories over the course of 12 months. So there will be 7 of those, matching the 7 decade outcomes, and those are very much also hands-on platforms for finding collaboration, finding partnerships, and working together across a whole suite of stakeholders. So I also invite you to take part in those decade laboratories. The first one will be on 7 and 8 of July, and this will be organized by IOC. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julian, for providing those pathways for engagement. And you all will have the links to the more information about the decade in the chat placed earlier on today's session. Participants, colleagues, dear panelists, we must move on. We will return to Michael's question and any others that emerge at the end. Michael, you will be the first, I promise. So, colleagues and panelists, our second segment of today is a technical session, which will highlight contributions from specific articles contained in the definitive volume as conveyed by the authors themselves, or also we will have managers of GEF-funded LME projects who will also highlight their contributions. And the first, no less, we will hear from Mr. Yinfeng Guo, who will speak about the application of ecosystem-based assessment and management in the Yellow Sea large marine ecosystem. Now, Yinfeng is the former project manager of this GEF UNDP UNOPS project. For over 30 years, he has contributed professionally to sustaining the well-being of people and ecosystem services in East and Southeast Asia through his areas of expertise and interest. A lawyer by training, he has evolved from being a specialist in biodiversity-related conventions and strategic planning and program management, freshwater, marine, and agricultural biodiversity and climate change adaptation, to specialized technical and managerial expertise in LMEs. Yinfeng, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Mitch. And first of all, let me join Andy to congratulate Ken and his team and all the contributors to finally come up to the launch of the impressive publication dedicated to LME, and in partnership with the Scope and also IWLearn and the University of Rhode Island. Indeed, I feel that with other panelists, I'm sure that the knowledge, experiences, and best practice contained in the publication will greatly inspire the LME community and the stakeholders to make continued and also bigger improvements in LME governance. As for the West LME or Yellow Sea large marine ecosystem, it's a semi-enclosed sea area of 400 square kilometers, bordered by 3 countries: China, DPR Korea, and also RO Korea. And it's inhabited by 600 million people along the coasts and in the watershed areas. From the year 2004 to 2020, the GEF UNDP has supported the 2 phases of the project to apply the LME approach to restore the ecosystem carrying capacity and facilitate the establishment of a long-term mechanism for better governance of the West LME. Through the ecosystem-based management, also integrated coastal management, the cooperation between China and our Korea has demonstrated significant stress reduction achievements and also social economic benefits. Now, these include the reduction in fishing efforts by 22%, and 17% in the Yellow Sea areas of China and also our Korea, respectively. An increase of critical habitats of 200,000 hectares of new MPAs, contributing to covering 5.5% of the total areas of the Yellow Sea. And the scaling up of an integrated multi-trophic agriculture, covering some 13,000 hectares of, and producing over 200,000 metric tons of sustainable seafood products every year. And some 7-fold increase in catch per unit effort of in our careers, marine ranching sites, and also 5 to 6 times return of investment in marine ranching sites in both countries. So these are some of the remarkable accomplishment through the LME application. And these achievements in the 2 project phases are also well captured in the LME story. Wise LME story, a publication currently still under the final stage of editing that underpins the journey of LME approach application in the Wise LME. We hope to launch it quite soon. So there are some important lessons learned in the LME approach for improvement of the Wise LME governance with GEF support, GEF UNDP support. First, the LME approach, is science-based. Okay, so consisting of a TDA and SAP, covering 5 aspects of assessment, as a systematically organized structure, and also presented by by Ken in the definitive volume of LMEs. Therefore, in the case of a Wise LME, it can be easily accepted, by participating countries in the process of diagnosing, negotiating, also agreeing, to the actions or joint actions to address the transboundary marine environmental challenges. Indeed, science in practice, serve as the most common denominator among stakeholders of the participating countries, and also foundational to strategic planning, policy making, LME and LME, adaptive management. So that's the first lessons learned in Wise LME. Second, natural and social sciences should be equally applied by government at different levels, academia, also citizens. During the 4-year second phase project, we have organized 21 conferences, symposiums, workshops, etc., or including study visits, in addition to the 5 project steering committee meetings to promote the policy dialogues, exchange of data information, both generated from projects, also from the national funding, including research fundings, sharing of knowledge and measurement practices in stress reduction, and also build the social networks, also scientific collaboration among various stakeholder groups in the Wise LME community. So the areas covered include both natural science, natural and also social sciences, and also ocean governance. So such knowledge serve as the very basis for mutually agreeing to the actions finally in the updated SAP, for continued reduction for some, for example, fishing efforts, while safeguarding the social welfare for displaced fishermen. So, both natural science, also social science need to be emphasized in order to make the changes or transformational changes. Third is the LME approach, if properly followed and also implemented, can generate environment and social economic benefits as demonstrated, which in return can provide a strong argument and also support at the political level for establishing the long-term LME governance mechanism. So that's the experiences, bottom-up approach, in the Wise LME. And of course, with the journey of LME approach, implementation, is long, right? It's a long process in application. There's much to expect, from the Wise LME for making more progress, addressing the remaining and also emerging challenges, for the Wise LME to answer to the call for, the UN Decade of Ocean Science in support of the implementation of SDGs, in particular SDG 14. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yinfeng, for that presentation and all the different levels and approaches that have been rolled out in the LOC. And also congratulations on an excellent archiving of the lessons learned and from this important series of projects, both on your website and our profile at IW Learn. We'll be sharing links to that in the chat. Okay, we're going to hear from another LME project manager now, I will like to introduce Ms. Viviane Kinyaga, who will speak about the Benguela Current LME Convention. And Viviane is the project manager of the UNDP EGF Benguela Current LME project, executed by the Benguela Current Commission, and leading the implementation of the SAP there in the Benguela Current LME. She's particularly interested in international environmental law as it pertains to transboundary water resource management, and has actively participated in the review and development of water resource management policy, legislation, and institutional setup in Namibia prior to the engagement on the Benguela Current. Now, Viviane, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mish. Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, good evening. I will highlight some key points from one of the chapters in the book that speaks to how the Benguela Current Convention is assisting the BCC parties to move towards an ecosystem governance approach. I am not one of the authors of the book. It was written before I joined the BCC. How I speak to the issues that have been raised in the book because I have article. I'm working with the colleagues who drafted the chapter. So basically, this chapter speaks to the evolution of the Benguela Current Convention because it entailed a lot of collaboration between the three BCC parties before the convention came into operation and cooperation between the three BCC parties to work together, mainly with a focus on understanding the ecology of the ecosystem. The focus at the time was really mainly on the biophysical elements of the ecosystem, where that the current large marine ecosystem, the ecosystem to be a very, very productive ecosystem. And it is also rich in valuable non-living marine
It does seem that we have lost Viviane for the moment. That's
managing, which is the third phase of GEF funding through UNDP to the convention, is supporting the parties to develop these blue economy policies or ocean strategies in other respects. As I indicated, that the collaboration and the cooperation amongst the parties started already in the early 2000s. At the time, the focus was really mainly rooted in science to try to understand the knowledge on the ecosystem. And this then culminated into the signing of the convention in 2013, as well as the establishment of institutional structures, including the Secretariat, which is based here in Swakopmund. So one would say that the BCC has a fairly well-established science program with the aim, and the aim of the program is to inform management and policy decisions related to the ecosystem. I think what is important and what we have learned now is that the program is expanding to pay attention to the wider ecosystem components, for example, to include the society, the economies, governance, and other issues that we did not put enough attention to. We are also realizing that science is never enough. When you think you've done something and you've completed it, then something or another issue would then come up. So we don't seem to be catching up, and there are really a lot of issues that need to be addressed. Currently, we are updating our transboundary diagnostic assessment, and there are really two important issues that have come up. We just finished one of our national consultation workshops last week in one of the countries. We still have 2 more to go. And the 2 key issues that I wanted to highlight, which did not come so strongly in our previous TDA, is the role of climate, it's on climate change, but really looking at the role of our coastal and marine ecosystem in carbon dioxide sequestration. So that's really something that's coming up now in our TDA. And then another one, which I think is really relevant to the whole our international waters portfolio, is the link between freshwater and marine ecosystems, particularly in relation to pollution and changes in water quality regimes. So that's really also another issue that's coming up now. I also wanted to use the opportunity to highlight some of the contribution that the current JEF UNDP project is making to further ecosystem-based governance in the BCC. And there are really 4 areas that I quickly want to highlight. The one area that we are currently working on is to develop guidelines. Initially, when the project started, we thought we will actually work on protocols which are binding. But what we've learned is that we have the convention, but the parties may not be as ready as we thought to move towards the specific binding protocols that we were anticipating. So for this reason, we are starting with the non-binding instruments, which are guidelines. These, for us at the BCC, they are very useful because our convention is very broad, looking at 4 big sectors: fisheries, mining, including oil and gas, environment, and marine transport. So we are really looking at broad issues, and we think that the specific guidelines will assist us to address some of the key issues. I also really liked the discussion relating to ballast water, because it's an area that's also of key interest in the Benguela Current Convention. And one of the strategies that has been adopted by the Commission is that we should align our implementation of the convention to other international treaties. And here we're talking about, for instance, a lot of the work that the IMO is doing, a lot of work that FAO is doing, for instance, on reducing or eliminating IUU fishing, and especially where there are instruments that have been domesticated at the national level, so that we don't have to then reinvent the wheel or do something that others are already doing. So in that way, we then strengthen the capacity within the region by working together. Then another one which I wanted to mention, which is one of the key contributions by the current JEF support to the BCC, is the establishment of monitoring and compliance measures to track the implementation of the convention. Because as I said, the convention came into being in 2013. So now we are really interested to know how the parties are implementing the convention and reporting on the convention. And the last one is to narrow the gap between resource users, regulators, communities, and these we are supporting through strengthening engagement of stakeholders in the activities of the BCC. I think there is a lot to speak about, but yeah, this is what I wanted to highlight. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Viviana, as always, for an excellent contribution and presentation and intervention. So many sectors, such a unique instrument, transboundary instrument in the world of LME and the Benguela Current. Thank you for sharing that, and looking forward to hear more as you enter new frontiers on sequestration, and especially the source to sea pollution issue. We will look forward to that resulting TDA. Now, colleagues, we are definitely a little bit behind, but our next speaker is the author of one of the papers in the LME definitive volume. Dr. Michael Fogarty will speak about LME global fisheries production and potential. And Dr. Fogarty is a senior scientist at the Northeast Fisheries Science Center in Woods Hole, Massachusetts. He holds adjunct appointments at the Marine Policy Center at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute, and the Graduate School of Oceanography at the University of Rhode Island, and the School of Marine Science and Technology at the University of Massachusetts. He's currently serving on national and international panels dealing with ocean observing systems, climate change, fisheries management, and ecosystem-based management. So Mike, you have the floor. And I have your slides as
Great.
well.
Thank you very much, Mitch. It's an honor to take part in this important launch of a very significant scientific volume. I'm going to talk and try to provide a broad overview of papers within the volume that deal with the critical issue of global fisheries production potential yield. In the first 3 sections of the volume, more than half deal quite specifically with this issue. So I'm not going to talk just about my own contribution, but rather trying to represent a broader swath of papers within the volume. The issue of understanding this global fishery production and potential yield, and in particular the determinants of that yield, really are critical to understanding how we can develop sustainable harvesting strategies throughout the world ocean. We're now in the process of making a transition to ecosystem-based fisheries management, as you've heard from previous speakers. And EBFM is fundamentally a place-based approach where we want to develop integrated management plans for defined ecological regions. And so you can see on a global scale that the idea and the implementation of the LME concept is really a very nice fit with what we need to do in establishing ecosystem-based fishery management throughout the world ocean. So in this image, you see the global map. You see an example of the application of some of the basic information at the LME level, where you have catches per unit area partitioned by LMEs throughout the world ocean. And here the color shades going towards the warmer scale or the higher levels of yield per unit of effort, and those towards the darker blue are lower yield. So you can see we have some pretty substantial differences among the LMEs in the production characteristics reflected in yield. And one of the challenges we have is to try to understand more about that, the causes and determinants of those variations. Next slide, please. So one of the most important things to understand is the context and the vital role of understanding these processes as we look at the potential role of fisheries in meeting needs for global food security. So here you see images for marine capture, fisheries, marine aquaculture in the lighter shades of blue in this image, and then on top of that, important information on inland fishery yields next, and then inland fishery aquaculture operations. And so you can see that basically we're moving towards much higher levels of overall productivity continuously over time. But there's been a switch from the capture fisheries to aquaculture in terms of the relative contributions to that overall yield. It's pretty clear that these food sources are extremely important in terms of the nutrition, both in terms of protein needs and macro and micronutrients, particularly in the developing world. Next, please, Mish. So in the definitive volumes, you'll see that there are actually a number of predictive models that are developed. And these range in quite varying levels of complexity to forecast the LME yields. This is just one representation that's sort of in the middle of the spectrum of complexity of the models here, this diagram. But they range from having quite sophisticated statistical techniques for forecasting and prediction to the development of ecosystem models. And I invite you to look within the sections of the first 3 sections to see clear examples of that. Next, please, Mitch. One of the things that really emerges in this process is one, the clear recognition that we can actually successfully predict the landings based on primary and secondary production in particular, and these account for a very substantial part of the differences in the observed yield among the LMEs that we deal with. So you'll see throughout the volume very clear illustrations of that and the importance of understanding exactly what we can expect in terms of yield from different LMEs, the limits to yield, and that in turn helps guide sustainable practices, fishing practices overall. In terms of looking at forecasts of potential yield, what we find is that although there's been historically a very large range of estimates of what the global ocean in particular can contribute in terms of yield to this overall need for food security, more recent estimates with refined ideas in terms of the fundamental production at the base of the food webs in particular give us a clearer view of what that could be. And we find that in general, the possibility of doubling the current yield if we have careful expansion to include underutilized species in particular, improved management of our traditional species that are now managed under single species management, and devising ways of increased levels of sustainable mariculture. So there are both strengths and weaknesses of the different elements of this approach overall in terms of putting our emphasis in different elements of the story. But these are three major areas where some of the potential yield that we can use to meet the needs of a burgeoning human population would come from. Of course, there are caveats, and one of the important ones is that, as you all know, we're really experiencing important levels of environmental change due to climate factors. Some of the projections on a global basis for what this means in terms of yield really reflect projected declines in primary production in a number of parts of the world ocean, which in turn really support most of the fisheries that we see. We find that this bottom-up control, starting at the very lowest levels of the food web, are essential factors in going forward in projecting the yields, and making understanding of the changes in those factors will become critical as we adjust our management strategies. So that concludes my brief overview of one of the important theme areas that we see in the first part of the book overall. Thank you, Mish.
Thank you very much, Mike, for guiding us to managing those yields sustainably in the context of this greater and greater hunger that we face. Thank you, Mike. And now we turn to the world's most significant supporter of LME projects. I have the pleasure to introduce Mr. Christian Severin, who will speak about the Global Environment Facility support of LME assessment and management. Mr. Chris is the lead for the International Waters Focal Area and coordinates the focal area's transboundary water engagement across its global portfolio, including LMEs, areas beyond national jurisdiction, lakes, rivers, and aquifers. He's been working with the GEF for more than 14 years. And before joining the GEF, Chris worked as a project manager in private sector companies dealing with both drinking water and fresh wastewater management, and in a Nordic European University Consortium facilitating cooperation within biosystems engineering. So Chris, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon. Just before we start, I realized that if you look at all the pictures that's been posted today, apparently it's very invigorating working with LMEs. You turn very young. I've seen that, all the presenters today, including myself here, but that's good. Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting us today, and to you, Ken, congratulations for this massive statement that is sitting here in front of us, 600-700 pages, which is just the top of a very large iceberg of knowledge that's been generated over the years and has a tremendous impact. So just to, let me start with this. So when I first heard about this, there was a lot of fuss about this LME approach. When I joined the GEF in 2005, Al Duda was talking about all the time, and Andy and all the other friends, and all the friends that are sitting here with panelists and attendees. I was like, what is this? Why are people so enthusiastic about this? It sounded a little bit boring to me, and I was like, But then, come a few years, a very, very short time after, I realized this is not only about these 5 modules, right? There's so many other things in it. It's the initial step for any kind of ocean governance. And when it all started, it was for many nations, it was the first time that the ocean agenda got lifted into be mainstreamed into policymaking and into ministries of important economic sectors. So that's the gist of it, right? So it's not only about fish or coastal resources, ports and shipping and recreational value. These are all part of it, right? And that's really, we have heard a couple of statements already on that along those lines today. But at the end of the day, it's also about the social cohesion and identity that an ocean area gives to local populations as well as countries. So I think that's what I keep on reminding myself that it's about all those things. Of course, it's a scientific, rigorous process that enables us to measure and quantify advances in the ocean, and create baselines in ministries. But at the end of the day, it's also about these different economic sectors and the interplay between them and the people utilizing the ocean systems. So Ken, you had some numbers earlier, and I just want to tell you, we have actually done even better now. So I think we are at 24 LMEs today, with a $1.2 billion grant investment leveraging 9.8 billion. So we are basically above the $10 billion mark, 11 billion, if you will, for investments, combined investments in LMEs and supporting the LME approach in 125 countries. So this is no small tribute to the value of the concept and the value that it brings to nations and to countries. So I just want to let that sit there for a little bit. Then we have within the GF overlaid all this with this TDA-SAP approach that was talked about a little bit earlier by, among others, all the previous speakers. So I don't think we need to elaborate on that, but I do think that it actually brings an additional set of value to the LME approach. The fact that we can get scientific communities to work together to bridge, to make that important bridge between science-based approaches to policymaking and informing policy. We also see, over the last couple of years, we've seen countries and the global agenda and the global discourse change. And luckily now oceans have a place there. It has a very substantial place. It's getting recognized for all the different values it brings. So I think we need internally in the GF and with all the different partners and countries we work with, make this even clearer, the linkage between a scientific-based approach to having this boundary diagnostic leading to priority setting, implementing these strategic action programs, which will eventually, of course, then there's a suite of tools that are going to be deployed here, ICM, ICZM, marine spatial planning, and all of this ultimately leads to this blue economy and sustainable blue economies that has been the buzzword and has been adopted as one of the end goals. I don't think we can talk about an end goal here. I think it's going to be a constant battle that we all have to work on for the next many years and coming generations. But at least there's a very, very good starting point. I think there's still challenges in this. Of course, we need to be better at illustrating the connectivity between the different systems, the different sectors, and also to illustrate to countries and to local communities why is it important to get this initial starting set of the TDA set, bringing out all the information. What does that give us? Well, it gives us an opportunity to inform decision making, right? To inform policy formulation and so forth. And that ultimately also increases the opportunities for the local populations. So I think these are some of the things that we need to be much better at, and we all know it, but it's still one of the sticking points for the LME approach to take off and to give the world, to be able to magnify the opportunities here. So it's transboundary cooperation, of course. It's multi-sectoral cooperation as well. And then what I've heard many times is that, if we just protect this area, we are going to be fine. And protection for some reason has become the buzzword of how we're going to save the ocean. I just do not believe that's the only, it's part of the solution, sure. But we do need to make sure that we have all these economic sectors find a sustainable way to continue their business. If we just say you can't do it, it will probably not work in the long run. I mean, people are still going to be hungry. We still need all the different services that the ocean provides. We just need to find a better way that we can do this without ruining the ocean at the same time as utilizing it. And of course, the SDGs are helping us with all this. But again, it's only giving us a framework. And I think when you look at the global discourse over the last 5 years, SDG 14 has gotten a lot of room, I think there's even in countries and nations are realizing more the value that the ocean provides, and that it's not just about fish or swimming opportunities when you go on vacation or whatever it is that is the buzz for it for some policymakers. I think that the coin has fell. I mean, people know and understand what it is that we are dealing with here, and we cannot just treat it as a garbage bin that we have been doing for a long time. So these are some of the challenges. I think we need to especially strengthen the link to translate the LME SAPs to local and national opportunities. When we're able to do that, that's when the key turns. And we have seen that in a number of investments around the world. Some of them already, speaking today and sharing these experiences with us. So for the coming years, I hope that we can continue to inform policy formulation, be part of this national priority setting, and make sure the politicians are aware of the different trade-offs when they make decisions. I think this is exactly what the LME concept can give us, and give not only us that manages these things on a daily basis, but also the world that can inform the global discourse. And I think we need to be better at selling that as a community altogether. So with that, I just want to thank you again so much for all this. Thank you for the session today. And I want to ensure you that in the next strategy, Jeff 8, where we have the first replenishment meeting tomorrow morning, at the LME concept in the international waters focal area strategy, the draft one that is up for discussion tomorrow, it's sitting there very, very prominently, and it is our main operators modus for the IW marine investments. So thank you so much, Ken, for all you've done, and I'm looking forward to continue working with you. And I know you have created a beast that will continue to live on for many centuries. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Chris. And in addition to the science, $10 billion is quite a legacy as well of sustained and catalyzed finance. And thank you for giving us those marching orders about reaching out to the other economic sectors and local communities about this important work. Colleagues, if you will stay with us for an extra 10 minutes, you will also hear the poll results that we've been conducting throughout this session. But our final speaker is Dr. JP Walsh, who will speak about cross-cutting scales of the LME approach from local to international. And JP is the director of the Coastal Resource Center at URI, and he's a professor of oceanography and a geological oceanographer with a doctorate in oceanography from the University of Washington, a Master of Science in Marine Environmental Science from Stony Brook University, and a bachelor's degree from Colgate. His research focuses on coastal sedimentary processes and related phenomena, such as coastal erosion and the identification of sand resources for beach nourishment. So JP, thank you for your support, and you have the floor.
And wow, the volume is a wonderful accomplishment after decades of work, and I want to offer my congratulations to Ken, Betsy, UNESCO, LME, and IW Learn, the Jeff, UNDP, Scope, and the entire LME community. It's really something to be incredibly proud of, and I know will serve as a framework for a lot of great future work in the ocean decade. CRC is in the Graduate School of Oceanography at URI, and we are bringing science to societal issues around the world. For over 50 years, we've been working in Africa, Asia, Americas, and especially in the US Northeast. Our NCRC has been involved in LMEs since its very, very beginning, and we're really proud of that history. One of the points I wanted to highlight here, which it really reiterate what's been said, is that as we move forward, we think work across scales, understanding the needs of fishers and that are afforded this. We need to use measure important properties and perspectives to guide our action and think about environmental, economic prosperity and social concerns. In the US Northeast Shelf, specifically in New England, CRC and its partners led the planning for the first offshore wind farm in the United States. And this was very much a local process. But we are now working hard with many partners on exploring the sort of LME scale potential and risk, both benefits and challenges of scaling up offshore wind. And that's in partnership with federal, state, and many local entities. With support from USAID, we're working with national partners in West Africa, Madagascar, and the Philippines, and many other places over time. As we think about the UN decade and using insights from the volume to be successful, we really need to think about that range of scales. For example, in Ghana, in the Guinea current system, we are a group to develop locally fisheries management plan by women. The small pelagic fisheries is, and we have worked with fishers in the Fisheries Council. In 2019, in the Philippines got enough partners, and in the meeting just this week, Dr. Joanne Castro from the Path Foundation highlighted how we really need to think about the human and our success in the future. And so as we think about SDG 14, and that's often in the forefront of our minds, we need to also keep in mind the other SDGs, in particular, for example, number 1, no poverty; 2, zero hunger; number 5, about the science we need for the ocean we want, and by we mean in a transdisciplinary way, engaging stakeholders at all levels, and of course use an ecosystem approach, thinking and acting at the LME scale and locally. So I want to thank you all, and again, congratulations.
And thank you again, JP, for this excellent partnership and for drawing those examples from the work of the Coastal Resource Center. I would like to thank all of our panelists for the spirited contributions today, and to all of the participants who have soldiered on together with us. It's been a fantastic contributions from all of you, so thank you for that. I promised to, if we could just take a few more minutes for a little bit of interaction. I promised that we would get back to Michael Akester's question. And I've also seen a couple of raised hands from the participants. So maybe just a few more minutes for those questions. And Michael's question was to the panelists, how many fishery performance indicators assessments have been undertaken in the LME supported by the GF and their implementing agencies? And where are these assessments available to be accessed? Would any of the panelists like to take a stab at that?
Well, can I just, I don't know where the specifics, where they would be sitting for each of those different assessments has been done, but Michael, as you know very well, Mish is the custodian of all information that's been generated for the last 30 years of Jeff Investments. And so I would hope that he has a good overview of where they are, and they should be available on that website. That's at least what we've been tasking all project managers to upload all information that's been generated, because this is public funding, right? So it should be available there. I might be wrong, but I mean that would be my starting place. Mish, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, and you'll have some work to do this afternoon to figure out where that is. But I mean, Michael, try there first, I think, and then if there are any specific projects, we can always reach out to the project managers, one by one. After all, it's only 24 of these LMEs, so it shouldn't be. It's not too many emails that has to be sent.
We will be following up with that. Thank you, Chris, for that. Mike, did you want to add anything? Okay. I had a raised hand from Gonzalo Cid of US NOAA. I'll just see, Gonzalo, if you're still with us, I will just see if I can unmute you to ask your question. I hope that works. Gonzalo, are you able to unmute? Ah, okay, no problem. I had one more question that was sent in, and I'm just checking my list. It was a question to Andy, which was, how are LMEs benefiting countries who participate in the JEF-funded projects? It was.
Okay. Well, every country that is participating in the JEF Finance LME program, including UNDPs, receives a financial support for engaging them in all elements of the project. In particular, these projects, when they're at the foundational stage, that is the preparation of the TDA and SAP, projects will support the engagement of technical, scientific, socioeconomic, other specialists, government representatives, and so forth from each country in both the multi-country TDA process, and then, of course, moving it more to the level of policymakers and decision makers in the SAP development and adoption process. In addition, each of the LME projects provides a range of capacity building support, training, and other things in thematic areas, whether it's marine spatial planning, marine protected areas, integrated coastal management, and so forth. So yeah, the bottom line is the countries and national governments, national-based stakeholders, in addition to when they exist, regionally mandated organizations around LMEs are all the beneficiaries that are, recipients of the support and benefits that the JEF finance programs provide.
Thank you very much, Andy. And I think, Chris, you would probably want to add something to that.
Yes, I would love to. Thank you so much, Mish. So this is actually, it's a great question, because this is one of the issues that when you look at JEF financing in general, there are a number of the focal areas within GFR funding streams that have national funding, straight up. So at the beginning of the replenishment, you get a certain amount of money. The international waters focal area is different, and the LME investments are different because they're regional in scope. But the points that were just raised by Andy here, these are some of the benefits. But that can be, it's not so simple to make that argument when you're sitting, if you're working in a large meeting that has 14 countries, 27 nations, or even, there's a very wide scope. So then it becomes a little bit more tricky to show how can a regional investment that's going to give us some data, how is that going to benefit me, and if I want to get reelected, how can I use this? I mean, because that's some of it, right? This ties to political economies and political realities of re-election, and what do I provide for my country, fellow countrymen, when I get these investments ongoing? Why do I do it? So I think that's exactly as I just said. And I think we need to be better at this. We're doing it, but I think we need to be even better at showing how can a understanding of a regional good, a shared transboundary good, as the large marine system is, how can that benefit me as a country? I mean, the Benguela Current is a great example, right? It took a while to get countries to agree on anything there until they realized the value that was actually shared, and that you had to have a handle on it in order to benefit your own national economic, suite of different economic sectors. So I think these are some of it's a very, very important point, because if we cannot show the value nationally, locally, then we fail. And I think we have not failed, but I think we can do even better at this point. So it's excellent, and it's a good discussion right there, at least for another 2 or 3 hours we could spend on this, but probably not today. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And I think with that, there are no more questions on the floor. Actually, there might be one more. Let's do one more, and then I promise you we will give you the poll results and end this session for today. I have someone with an,
a
yes, Ken, go ahead, please.
In terms of the value to individual countries, we were sensitive to that issue. And I'm pleased to report that over the past several years, we've been editing regional volumes of LME activities as they relate to socioeconomic considerations in the following global regions. So we have a volume on the LMEs of Asia. We have a volume on LMEs of Latin America and the Caribbean. And we have a recently completed volume that's just been published on LMEs in Africa. And in each of these special volumes, which have been produced through Elsevier Science and two journals that they produce, the Journal of Environmental Development and the Journal of Oceanography, Deep Sea Research. There are links to those volumes in the portfolio that will be released today. I simply wanted to make that known in that the information in these special journal volumes is relative to the question raised and being addressed by Andy and Chris.
Thank you, Ken. There is a two-part question, and this will be the last one, I think, from Jing Li. I hope I'm saying that correctly. How can the regional governance mechanisms established by LME projects support science advancement and collaboration in the region, for example, on ocean observations? And how can LME projects cooperate with scientific organizations and projects in the region or regions in order to pursue sound scientific support to LME projects? I think, not to call on anyone, I think Viviane gave and Yinfeng gave some good examples of that in their answers. But again, the question is open to any of the panelists. Would any of you?
I'll just jump in and say, you know, I think there's so many ways that science can add, and I think there's probably a multitude of examples that could be given. I think more what we probably need to think about is how do we, you know, sort of scale up some of the local observations and really integrate that science into.
Thank you, JB. Well, with that, unless there's any of the other panelists would like to add, I would like to again thank everyone. Just to quickly provide you the answers to the poll that we had going on in the chat. You all had it, or a majority of you had the first question correct. How many of the world's annual marine fisheries catch? It is 80% and 27 trillion US dollars in ecosystem goods and services. You were all correct on what basis of the boundaries of LMEs not determined. That was mostly correct. 53% said exclusive economic zones. Interestingly, in which year was the concept of LMEs introduced to the science community? That was not correct. The correct answer was 1984, which 38% of you did get correctly. A majority of you had it correctly. How many projects were financed by the GEF? That was 23, and now 24, as Chris noted. 70% of you had gotten that right. And thank you for your answers to the other questions. And with that, I would like to thank you all for attending and hope that we can continue this conversation and join us for future LME and coastal area events. Please follow our website, iwlearn.net/marine, for the slides, questions, and information. And thank you to the speakers and our supporting organizations, and for all of you for making the time to learn more about LMEs and the definitive volume. Please don't forget to register for your copy. Be safe, be well, and we hope to see you in the not too distant future in 3 dimensions. So happy Earth Day tomorrow to everybody, and thank you again.
Thank you, Mish.
Chris. Thank you. Everybody, bye.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you, everyone. Take care. Take care, Ken.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mish. Bye.
Thank
And
you.
also Nat.
Bye-bye.